great. Thank you, Oprah, for that great introduction. So welcome, everyone. We're glad that you could join us to talk about Get More Math Spiral Review, our new STAAR redesign item support, and our free full year pilot offer for the 23-24 school year. I'd encourage anyone who's already interested in scanning the QR code at the lower right of the screen, and I'll give you guys just a moment to do so. We'll be sending you an email if you scan that code. Oh, here we go. All right, so my name is Elizabeth Healy. I'm the Texas Account Manager for Regions 9 through 17 and 20. I'd also like to introduce my other two colleagues on the webinar today. That's Lakeisha Malveaux. She's the Texas Account Manager for Regions 1 through 8 and 18 and 19. And Tiffany Smith, who's our Curricula and Student Privacy Specialist, who works on the product side of our organization. Lakeisha is going to man the chat today, and then Tiffany will be adding some support for any in-depth questions you might have at the end of the webinar about the functionality of the new STAAR item types. So today we're going to cover a few things. We're going to talk about Get More Math, who we are and what we do. We're going to talk about the rollout roadmap for our new STAAR item type releases. And then most of the presentation is going to cover an in-depth look at the new STAAR item types and their functionality. We're going to go through a click-through version of from the student's view of how we're going to interact with those item types. And then finally, we'll end with some details about our free full year pilot that's available to campuses who are new to us for the 23-24 school year. All right, so let's talk about Get More Math and how we can help your students build long-term retention and break the forgetting cycle through our spiral mixed review. So when I talk to educators, I always ask them, hey, can you relate to this situation? You are rocking and rolling in your classroom. You're trying to really hook students in and engage students in the math lesson, and maybe they are. Maybe they're raising their hands. Maybe they even do pretty well at unit tests. But as that math curriculum is, it bounces around a bit. And a few weeks later, you have to say, all right, guys, remember that thing we did? Let's build this topic today. And then your students give you what I used to call was like the death stare, the one where they had that deer in headlights pause. And as educators, we kind of laugh about this, but what it really means is that you're having to use your current instructional minutes to go back, review things that you really thought your students already knew. So that's exactly why Get More Math was created. It was created by a 20-year math veteran, Josh Britton. He taught Algebra 1 for about 20 years, and he actually created this program for himself, for his own classroom, and used it for about 14 years before ever turning it into a software for the wider public. The first thing that I always like to make sure that people understand is that we are not the instructional component of the lesson. In fact, Josh likes to say that Get More Math starts with humans and ends with humans. We believe that the humans are actually the best teachers, not computers, and that teachers, for that reason, teachers have full control. We do pair well with any curriculum you're already using, and we are TEKS aligned for grades 3 through 11. The place that we actually stand out the most is through our automated spiral review. We call it mixed review. And this is essentially where any skill a teacher sends students to practice automatically gets put into a cumulative spiral review. So as the teacher is moving forward with curriculum, students are going to continue to spiral backwards. And as they spiral backwards, that practice is individualized for every student. So I want you to think about it as a spiral review, but for the individual, not just the class. So the whole idea here is we're trying to break the cycle of forgetting and make sure students have a strong foundational math skills before they move on to that next grade level. So when we talk about a typical math lesson, we can agree that, you know, teachers usually teach for a greater portion, and then students go into some practice, right? Curriculum paces forward, and we assume that that mastery is achieved. And in a typical year, we add up those units and, you know, those days to create units, and perhaps we follow that by that unit exam, right? So we sort of rinse and repeat this process, adding more days, more instruction, more unit tests. But as the school year starts to move on, you're going to notice that your students are going to start, forgetting some of those concepts from earlier in the year. Eventually, we make it to the end of the year, but at this point, your students have already forgotten that former content. And what do we do as teachers? We try to cram 3 weeks of review into that area of time to try to cram it all back into students' heads before that STAAR exam. And then we just hope for the best results. Well, with Get More Math, we know that there's a better way to help students gain proficiency, not just temporary understanding. So what we like to do is re-envision that old method by seamlessly and automatically moving students to spiral through prior content by having students practice in our mixed review part of the software. Mixed review helps long-term retention, it's cumulative and individualized. So let's focus right now on how Get More Math supports the teacher in the lesson planning phase of this process. So remember, we're not a canned curriculum. We have a skills bank of over 3,000 skills. In fact, in the lesson planning phase, a teacher would go into our program. So this is what our interface looks like. It's very, very simple. In fact, we have two tabs, a work tab and a classes tab. Teachers would go into that work tab. They could choose through topics, through the Texas standard folder, unit guides, and also through map growth. So we have lots of different collections for teachers to choose from. Teachers can also very easily add an assignment. They can give that assignment a name, any name that they choose. And I want you to notice that that Texas collection. So since I'm talking to Texas educators, I want to make sure that you guys know that the Texas Standard Collection is very excellent. Get More Math has made a commitment to being 100% TEKS aligned. So when I talk to Texas educators, I always want to make sure you're going through this folder to make sure that that alignment that you're looking for is there. So another thing to note is that teachers actually have access to all the grade levels when they're choosing, which makes targeted practice for scaffolding up and down very easy in Get More Math. Let's say that the teacher is doing an algebra lesson and they've gone into that Texas Standards folder and they're looking at the TEK that they want to teach for that day. They would go in, choose the TEK, and what they're going to see is a drop down of all of the associated skills that we house in Get More Math that align to that TEK. So a teacher gets to go through, find that skill, that particular skill they're looking for. And then what's going to happen is that you're going to see an example. So teachers are previewing this before they ever send it to students to practice. Another important thing to note here is that our practice is dynamically coded. So for example, a teacher's not just going to get a static set of 20 of these questions. They can actually cycle through and take a look at different types of those questions to make sure that they align to their teaching for that day. They would very easily just add that skill to their assignment. And then they can add more skills to that particular assignment. Afterwards, they would go in, they would save that assignment. They can very, very easily, again, assign that to their classes, and they can choose the classes that they want to assign it to. All right, so we just looked through and we saw how Get More Math supports teachers with resource alignment during the planning stage. Now let's take a look at what students interact with. So remember, in that assignment portion of our software, assignments are short and sweet. They're focused practice meant for checking understanding on that day, kind of like an exit ticket, if you will. So here's what a student screen would look like. I want you to notice the top of the screen. Remember, we just added 3 skills to our assignment. You'll notice that there are 3 boxes also at the top of the screen. Each skill is represented as a box in Get More Math. So when students interact with this lesson, they would choose the correct point, plotting their point there. They would check the correct answer. And once they're correct, these students are going to get immediate feedback. So let's find out what happens when a student answers a problem incorrectly in Get More Math. Let's say that the student has confused the formula for finding slope. So I want you to notice that there's no button or hint or instructional video here that opens. Students, when they miss a problem, are immediately driven to fix their misconception rather than do the entire page incorrectly and turning it in. The student has a number of ways to seek help. The student can ask a neighbor for help because while the neighbor is also working on that same skill, the problems are dynamically generated so the students don't have the same problems as one another. The student can also use their mouse and click on the raised hand icon and ask their teacher for help. Students must correct their mistake before they move on. And again, that immediate feedback is given. Sorry. All right, so before we move on to the mixed review portion of this, I do want to go over these boxes, the colors and the codes on the box. They have some significance in Get More Math. So assignments are meant to be that short and focused exit ticket. This is where new topics are introduced. So on this first day of the lesson, in an assignment, students will receive that skill initially as a red box. So the red box simply means that there's no evidence that the student has interacted correctly or that they've gotten a question correct, or perhaps that they haven't actually interacted with that problem yet. The entire goal for this first day is just simply to get the student to change their box or their skill and level up to yellow. Yellow indicates an initial understanding. Now, as educators, we know that the first day of a lesson is not where proficiency is built. Students need more practice. That's common sense, right? So with Get More Math, what we do is immediately after a student is done with an assignment, we automatically send students to mixed review. And this is where our program says that they are building proficiency. So, for example, a green box is accomplished once a student shows success over the course of 3 full days. A silver star is success over an even longer period of time, and gold star is a representation of with fidelity and accuracy. The student has been able to answer that question type over a very long period of time. So as teachers add new skills, students will continue to revisit and spiral backwards through all of the skills that teachers have taught throughout the year. So when a student gets to this screen, this is what mixed review looks like from the student side. By definition, real spiral review is a repeated opportunity to practice skills that teachers taught. This is why our program does not send students on a track, taking them to places that the teacher has never been. Each of these boxes is a skill aligned to a lesson. So remember that lesson we just did with 3 skills? I want you to notice that these 3 boxes are representative of that. So that student has had that initial success, and now those 3 skills are automatically banked here in that cumulative review. Imagine these 3 skills as perhaps the first 3 skills that the teacher has ever taught for the year. Now, as students work through and spiral through Get More Math, the program is also learning evidence based on students' evidence, right? They're learning how students are doing with these question types. So Get More Math is going to start learning where the student is having challenges. It's going to know where their emergent understandings are happening, what they've gained proficiency at, and what they've really mastered and what they're excelling at. All of this is live diagnostic data for the teacher to then use. So at this point, people always ask me, okay, so what is that $sign for? So in Get More Math, $signs represent prioritized questions. Remember, this spiral review is not just spiral review, it's individualized. So each of these boxes with the $sign represent one of those prioritized questions for that student. So obviously it's going to represent or push students towards things they find challenging, but it's also going to push students towards things, like the silver star question, things that they haven't seen in a while. So this is saying, hey, you were great at this 3 weeks ago. Let's put it back in front of you to see if you've maintained that proficiency. If a student gets this incorrect, it's going to level them down and then send them those question types kind of in a rapid fire succession to help build that proficiency back up. Those $signs are worth points. Points are worth game credits. Games are 90-second brain breaks. So as that program learns your students' and strengths and weaknesses, Get More Math also makes that data available to the teachers. My favorite data view is through our small groups tool, where a teacher can go into mixed review. They go into that tab. They click on any skill that they've taught. Remember, this could have been 2 to 3 weeks ago. And then boom, here are my small groups. In this situation, if teachers are having students work in mixed review, they can easily call students over that are struggling for some one-on-one support. So for example, I'd say, hey, Alex and Deshawn and Rosanna, you guys keep practicing your Get More Math. It's going to individualize that practice for you anyways. I'm going to call over Jasmine and Saleha. Hey, bring your whiteboard, bring your markers. And at that time, we give teachers resources to use. If you click on problem, there's your problem type. So not only did we put your students into small groups, but we also provided resources for targeted intervention right then and there. It's only 2 clicks. That's one of my favorite things about Get More Math. And remember, Get More Math is dynamically coded, which means they never run out of example types. All right, so that was a lot to talk about. Lakeisha, are there any questions we need to address in the chat at this moment in time? I just want to make sure I'm addressing anything that's happening there.
No questions so far, but just a reminder, if you have any questions or thoughts, feel free to put in the chat, or we have an upcoming Q&A as well.
All right. So what we're going to do next is we're really going to get into depth with those STAAR item types. We're going to talk about our rollout roadmap. So just as Get More Math committed to 100% TEKS alignment in the past, we are also dedicated to supporting Texas teachers with TEA's new STAAR redesign. Our team's been following the TEA guidelines and resources as they've been released to the public. We've been revising and updating our vast skills bank to align with TEA's new STAAR problem types. Now, while striving for that alignment, part of our process has, with our development team, has been incorporating our best fit functionality for each grade level, vetting these with Texas teachers, and also making it printable. We wanted to update you on how we're adapting towards that redesign. One thing to note here is that when teachers are in the work tab, we wanted, since those question types are integrated into the standards folder, we also wanted to make sure it was really easy to find collections of these questions. So teachers have access to a new folder in Get More Math called STAAR Redesign, where we've curated just these item types so that teachers can really target that practice. All right, so let's go really in depth and look at those new STAAR item types and see how Get More Math is supporting Texas teachers. We're going to look at these item types as if we were a student clicking through the program. First, the first three I wanted to mention are actually item types that were already natively embedded in Get More Math. We've actually supported these item types for years now. Our text entry, our equation editor, and our graphing item types. So we'll just go one by one. Text entry. So TEA is describing this as students responding by typing a brief string of text, such as a number, word, or phrase. We're going to be seeing that in tested in that in grades 3 through 8 in EOC. And Get More Math widely supports this. Here's an example of one of those problem types. So you can see that this is a 3rd grade TEK. Students would go in and interact with that problem, and you can see that there is a text entry field there. Students, when they answer this, would simply use their keyboard. We also, by the way, support an integrated keyboard for users that have iPads. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that today. So when students go through, they use that text entry field, they'll type in their answer, and then of course they get that immediate feedback. One thing to note again in Get More Math about the text entry is occasionally you're going to notice that some question types are going to be a label required type. So as students are typing in their answer, if they see the label required there, they're going to know that they also require a label for this. If a student answers this incorrectly, like they think that they should be able to submit that, our program is going to prompt them and make sure they know that they must include that label. As any good math teacher knows, labels are important, right? All right. So the next one that we support is equation editor. So TEA describes this one as that the student can write responses in the form of fractions, expressions, equations, or inequalities. We're going to see this tested in grades 3 through 8 and EOC. Get More Math also widely supports this. And I'd like to kind of talk a little bit about how we might support that in an upper level way. So here's an example of an 8th grade TEK. This is a 2-step equation. And so I wanted to mention that our problem types also cover 2-step equations. One of the other things that I wanted to cover is the way that equation entry is entered. We do support multiple variations of that. So if the student wrote this in a different order and it was correct, our program would also count that correct. I also wanted to show how that text entry field and our function keyboard work. So the second part of this question is asking for a decimal or a fraction. We're going to choose that fraction answer choice, and students can also answer with fractions here. And of course, at the end, they get that immediate feedback. All right, graphing. Graphing is by far one of the most widely supported parts of our program. Josh actually created this for Algebra 1, so graphing is one of his strengths. TEA describes this as students selecting points, drawing lines, dragging bar graphs, and performs other functions to independently create different types of graphs. We're going to see this in grades 3 through 8 in EOC. And I wanted to mention that we widely support this and the types of support we provide. So we support responses that are number lines with one variable and compound inequalities, coordinate planes with points, linear and quadratic functions, inequalities, and systems. All of these are widely available in Get More Math. Here's a quick example from Algebra 1, what one of those problem types look like. And so I'd like to go through a couple of different levels of these. This is an example from 5th grade where students are asked to plot a point. They're going to interact with that answer area and check that that is correct. And then, of course, they get that immediate feedback. Here's another example from 7th grade. This is 7th grade TEKS supporting students work with inequalities. So here you're going to see that text entry field with that function keyboard in use. And as students work through that, one thing to note here is that they will check that first part of the problem first before moving on to the second. And then Get More Math allows them to graph that line in the correct direction by simply using that keyboard. And of course, immediate feedback, right? Lastly, we have an Algebra 1. This one is also graphing an inequality. In this particular graph example, students are going to get options for the different types of lines that they can graph. They're going to plot their point, then they're going to, plot the intersection. And as they work through this, the student is also going to get the option of shading that field. So for example, we use sort of like an inline choice option here where students are going to select what they want to do with the area of the graph that they want to shade here. And again, of course, immediate feedback, right? All right, so now we're on to the next 3 item types that are our newly supported item types. That includes multi-select, match table grid, and inline choice. Multi-select, TEA describes this one as students can select more than one correct answer from a set of possible answers. This is supported, or we're going to see this tested in grades 3 through 8 and EOC. Now, here's a couple things that are important to note in Get More Math. One of the things Get More Math did was we were looking at those TEA examples of those sample question types that we were given. And one of the things that we noticed is that most of the multi-select question types indicated a number of answers to choose. So Get More Math, even though it's not in the TEA description, we are supporting what's happening in those STAAR sample problems. So if it is multi-select in Get More Math, it will prompt the student to select a certain number of responses. So when students go through, they're going to select that number, and then they're going to check on their answer. All right, match table grid. So the TEA description of this one is that students match statements or objects to different categories presented in a table grid. Get More Math also has noticed some of that similarity to the multi-select. We're aligning to those TEA examples in which a number of columns may vary. So here's an example of that match table grid. You're going to see that the student here is selecting the appropriate response per question choice. And so as a student interacts with that, they're going to see this prompted, select the correct option for each equation. So this matches those TEA STAAR problem type samplers. And so students are going to select that correct field, answer it, and of course, immediate feedback, right? Okay, inline choice. So the TA description of this one is that students select the correct answer or answers from one or more drop-down menu or menus. This is going to be seen in grades 3 through 8 and EOC. And the way that Get More Math does this is we are again aligning to those TEA samples in which the number of drop-downs are going to vary and the number of answer choices in each drop-down can also vary. So this is an example of what a Get More Math grade 3 inline choice problem would look like. And so as students interact with that drop-down menu, they're going to be choosing from a variety of answer choices. So here you only have 2. In the next one, this one also has 2. So they're going to choose the correct response here. And again, they're getting that immediate feedback. Okay, so the last group of item types are the group that are coming out very, very soon. So we've got drag and drop, hotspot, and fraction model. These are all in development, being tested and vetted by Texas teachers. They're also going through our process, and they should all be completed by April of 2023. I do know that drag and drop is coming out soon. Let's take a look at these. So drag and drop. TEA description is that students evaluate a given number of options, words, numbers, symbols, and chooses from which responses to drag to a given area in a diagram, a map, or a chart. We're going to see this tested in grades 3 through 8 in EOC. The way Get More Math does this is that we support varieties of answers. So for example, ordering least to greatest or greatest to least, a table, filling in empty cells in that table based on the given information. We support an answer box, essentially kind of like an open-ended multiple choice question, but students would drag the correct option to that spot. The equation and expression builder, students can drag the number or operations into the boxes to build the equation or expression from a given situation. And then finally, categorization, dragging names of shapes to drawings is kind of a rough example of that. So here's what one of those problem types in Get More Math would look like. We're going to explore an ordering problem type from least to greatest. So the way a student would interact with this is that they would click with their mouse, they would drag that item type to the appropriate area, and then of course put it into least to greatest. If they get this question incorrect, Get More Math is going to highlight that mistake and prompt students to reorder and make sure that they put that into the correct order. Okay, fraction model. So TEA describes this as students represent a fraction by dividing an object into the correct number of sections to indicate the denominator and clicking to shade the appropriate number of sections to indicate the numerator. Get More Math is supporting two types of fraction models. So we have type 1, which means that students have to simply shade the correct number of sections given in the model. And we also have type 2, where students have to generate an entire model by selecting the total number of sections and the number of shaded sections. We want to give you guys a good view of both of those types, so I'm going to go over both of them here. So type 1 is where students are selecting the correct number of fields to shade. So they would select each of these, and when they enter, of course, they get that immediate feedback. Type 2 is where they're generating a model. So they're going to read and interact with that question and use these drop-down menus to select the total number of parts first. And so the student would go ahead and select that from the choices there. And they are also going to select the number of shaded parts. So a little bit of, it kind of interacts a little bit like inline choice there. And then they will generate the model based on the student's selections here. Okay. The last item type that we have is Hotspot. TEA describes this as a student responding by selecting one or more specific areas of a graphic. So we're going to see this tested in grades 3 through 8 and EOC. With Get More Math, we're aligning this again to those TEA examples, specifying the number of solution areas for students to select. The student cannot in Get More Math select more than the specified number of areas. So here's an example where students would select the point on the number line. This is a 4th grade TEK. We're going to take a look at a 7th grade TEK where they have multiple correct answers. So again, we're using that prompt of selecting the number of correct answers. Students are going to interact with that graphic and select those points. And again, that immediate feedback is there for them. All right, so we've covered what those new STAAR item types in Get More Math look like. I'd like to end this webinar with a little bit of details about our pilot partnership. Again, this QR code here is here so that you can, from your computer screen, scan that and create a calendar invitation with either Lakeisha or myself. So the way the Free School Pilot Partnership works is that we offer Get More Math for free for an entire school year. It actually can start now until July of 2024. It includes 3 hours of complimentary professional development, and it's unlimited for the number of teachers and students. The way it works is that we are able to offer this for free. Our one big commitment piece is training, though, because we'd really love to train your staff. We know that teachers need support with programs, and we'd like to offer that as a part of the partnership with 3 professional development sessions. The first training is going to go over and walk your staff through how to set everything up. The second training goes through our data and lets teachers look at relevant data. We try to schedule that one 6 weeks after the first training so that they're looking at their own student data. We really like for that data to be relevant. And then our last training is over exams. We didn't get to talk about exams today, but we do have an individualized exam feature that allows you to send students corrections and also follow-up exams on what they got incorrect. So those are our training sessions. And again, if anybody here would like to make an appointment or get in touch, my email address is below my picture. I'm Elizabeth Healy. And then my partner, Lakeisha, is manning the chat today. Her information is also there, and our region numbers, just in case you're trying to get to the correct person. You can also find any of this information on our website at www.getmoremath.com. So I think I'm going to leave this up for a moment. Lakeisha, do we have any questions in the chat that we might need to address?
We don't have any questions currently. There was a question asked, just in case some of our attendees haven't been able to see the chat. One of the questions was, does GMM allow Clever as a single sign-on? And the answer to that is yes. We do sync with Clever as a single sign-on. Specifically as a free pilot campus, we do offer web access, whereas your teachers, student users, teacher users can certainly access us on our website as well. And then a second question, Elizabeth, is, are there benchmarks built in for a BOY, MOY, or EOY assessment? And the response, which is also chatted, is that we do not have pre-constructed or pre-made middle of the year, beginning of the year, or end of year assessments, but we do have a fantastic TEKS aligned diagnostics folder, which actually allows for teachers to customize and build and plan and assign specific pre-test or assessments that can gather some great baseline data. Are there any additional questions? This is our Q&A portion, I believe. Is that correct, Elizabeth?
Yeah, we can start taking questions.
Absolutely, perfect. So feel free to ask or unmute your mic if you like, or share in the chat. All right, so we have another question asking, could a district or school level coach create the assessments and then share with the teachers? The answer to that is absolutely. One of our great features, we have so many good features. Unfortunately, Elizabeth didn't have a chance to show all of those, but we have a collaboration tool and feature built into our skills bank that does allow for teachers to share amongst other teachers or teams. And we also have it so that if they're in the same organization or same district, they can certainly share from a coach to teachers as well. So yes, there are some great collaboration tools with that. Any other questions? Please post, share, or unmute your mic.
Oh.
There's another question, Elizabeth. I'm going to let you answer this one again. The question is, can you tell us more about the training options, and are you available to come to campuses?
Yes, we can arrange on-site visits if the campus is amenable to that. And the 3 training sessions really, we offer those a couple different ways. Actually, I should probably review those. So the 2 options for training are, or there's actually 3: on-site visits, Zoom training, or we do a self-paced pilot for smaller campuses that may not have like common PLC time. So we do offer training through those various modes. And there are 3 one-hour trainings associated with each pilot. And if it's the self-paced module, those are 3 modules covering each of those same topics: the setup, how to add students to your classes, how to roster students, and how teachers can create assignments. The second one is over data. Like I was saying, we like to schedule that one a little bit, maybe 6 weeks between the first and second. And then the third session is again over those exams that I was talking about.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And we do have another question from Philip. He's asking, can you assign standards to students that are above and or below their grade level?
The answer to that is yes. So there are a couple of different ways that you can do that. You can actually put, one of the features I actually love as a former educator is that you can put students in more than one class. So let's say that you have students that need additional practice, or maybe let's say they're HB 4545 class or tutorial class after school. Students can be a part of more than one class, and you can send directed practice to students that way. So if you're needing to scaffold down or scaffold up, don't forget about our GT kids. You can target that practice in that way. Oh, and Lakeisha, I just saw that you answered that as well.
I did, yeah. I'm putting it in written text as well. No, you're doing a great job explaining, but in case some people are print and visual people, I want to answer that as well. And thank you, Christy, for joining us well. And we will be in touch with you as well. Any additional questions? All right, so I know, Elizabeth, you mentioned that the pilot is certainly available for our attendees here and their campuses unlimited with a free site license that can be accessible pretty much immediately all the way through July 31st of 2024. Does anyone have questions about the pilot or how to get in touch? All right. Elizabeth, would you like to stay on for maybe a few minutes or so in case people might have questions or want to chat?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to keep this screen up just in case people still need to gather that information. But yeah, I can stick around for a little bit. I know we had an hour, but I realized people are really busy.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to steal all their time.
Perfect.
Ofer, I wanted to say thanks again for having us today and setting up this webinar for everybody.
Sure, and I think I already sent you the list of who registered so you can contact them. And I think we're going to wrap it up because I don't see any questions. So
I think that's great.
And thank you very much to those that are still here, and we hope to see you in other webinars. Thank you very much.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Elizabeth.
All right. Thank you.